we going to talk about that time? Okay. Might save it for the real deal. No.
One of our Bel Aire citizens is speaking at the Kansas League Municipalities on Thursday. He gets 10 minutes. (6:32). Call a workshop to order. First item on the agenda is the purchasing policy. So, Mr. Lasher, do you want to take that, or is that going to be Mr. Henry?
Yeah, so I'll let Councilmember Smith, maybe if you want to kind of tee it up for,
Sure.
Then staff will kind of follow up on some details for you.
Great.
So we had a workshop, I think the last workshop, the chief came and talked with us about the body cams, and it was pretty unanimous when we asked him to, hey chief, I think your proposal is the right proposal, but we would like to make sure we're looking at our alternatives here. And so we asked him to go get some competitive bids. And as I thought about that after the meeting, we've done that a couple of times as a governing body. And I got to thinking, gosh, maybe that's not so fair to staff to have them show up and then have us ask them to go get some more bids. Maybe we need to do a better job of kind of laying out our expectations. If that's going to be an ongoing expectation of the council, we should lay that out and communicate that so that, everyone knows what we're expecting. And so I sent Jackie a note and said, hey, Jackie, what do you think about creating a policy that kind of addresses this? Lo and behold, we have one. And it's the purchasing policy that we have here tonight. And so that's kind of, I think, why this came to our agenda is, that conversation that I had. And, as I looked at it, I had some thoughts and some feedback, and I've talked with Jackie about some of the thoughts and feedback that I have, and I know she's talked with Ted quite a bit. And so at this point, I think it's just on our agenda to review and provide some feedback on the existing policy that I actually didn't know that we had, but I know staff, I'm sure, already knew that we had this, and maybe just update it because I think it's a fairly old policy at this point. So that's kind of, I think, where we're at.
Yeah, so it's always good to look at policies every so often. This has been around, well, you saw who the mayor was at that point, so it's been around quite a while. And so I think Jackie's got some notes that she kind of wants us to follow, and then Ted's got some comments because he's actually thought about it as well and come up with some ideas, and we'll throw those out, and then council can give us your opinions and direction, and then maybe we can make some good positive changes.
So when Councilmember Smith and I met, he kind of clarified some points that I thought were really valuable. Ted and Ty and I talked as well as to what we're actually doing, all the efficiencies that are going on that are just not captured. So this draft that is kind of a working document that council has are kind of like a first step at some recommended changes, kind of taking in all that feedback. I think the mayor also provided some guidance that kind of helped us to kind of see clearly how we were working. We kind of had mashed two projects up together, two areas up, a vendor management kind of framework and then a purchase policy. And they were just like, one line was dealt with vendors, the next line dealt with purchases. It was just mashed up. But the materials that provided made it really clear that we possibly need to look at separating those two policies. So the 4 areas that I guess we can walk through, just recommended as a start. Ted will weigh in on some of these. Councilmember Smith has some thoughts on this, and of course everybody else probably does too. But if we can look at it in 4 areas, I think that'll be a good start to cleaning up the policy. So one that we all
I'm sorry, Jackie, I just want to be clear. This is the old one. These are notes about what we want to do about the new one. I actually wasn't even clear when I was reading that prior.
Okay, so what I have is, one, the staff report includes a framework for changes.
Okay.
Two,
These are
the
like
old one.
proposals about how we think maybe we should be going forward. but
Correct.
not how it's gonna happen.
Correct. And the red line one are what the first cut at those changes might look like, having talked to everyone, or the experts and Councilmember Smith. So the first area would be for council to discuss the driving priority for purchases.
Excuse me, Jackie. I don't have a red line.
I didn't give you one. I'm sorry.
And then there is a third one.
Can I give you this? The third one,
So maybe we can just walk through the documents. I'll hold them up. This, I think, is the staff report.
This.
It says staff report at the top right.
Oh, yeah, I do have one of those.
That's the staff report on it, and that's the framework that Jackie has helped put together for the discussion. There's a memo as well about it, which I think is more details on the staff, a more detailed summary of kind of suggestions based on the staff report. There's the actual purchasing policy, and then there's a red line purchasing policy.
Right. So I wasn't sure what we were talking about all the time then.
thank you. So we'll start with the red line version just to work from, and I'll follow along with the staff report I provided, which has 4 areas that you may want to look at. So if that's okay, so the first thing I think we all agree would be to clarify the driving priorities. In the conversation with Councilmember Smith, he pointed out that it's not just the cheapest sometimes, it's the relationship between quality and what we need to do the job. And sometimes innovation should be the priority. So we needed to hear from you what that initial policy statement should be. This should be brief. It should be something that a staff person can pull off the shelf and kind of have an idea of what priorities should be considered when making a purchase. So one recommended, that first bolded, recommended acquire the best quality products at the best price for Bel Aire taxpayers in every purchase we make. That was the recommended language.
Well, I guess the driving word that comes to mind that isn't there, but is defined there, best quality at best price is value. What is the best value? Is that provides that compromise between, you can't get the highest quality for the lowest price. There's some sort of
Yeah.
Yeah.
between. But maybe the word value, I don't know. I was just thinking that word is missing, but it is defined.
Right.
But maybe if we wanted to clarify that further, talking about what is the best value. I don't know, if we wanted to simplify it, maybe summarize it.
I agree. Yeah. Best value is what you're driving for.
Best
Right.
quality. Some priorities that we've seen before are in the old version under Mayor Smith, it seemed that buying from a local supplier was paramount. Is that still the most important thing here, or trying to buy within the state? Maybe paying a little more to stay in Bel Aire or to stay within the state.
Can you define what you mean by a local supplier? I think Mr. Smith's, or the current policy says Bel Aire, doesn't it?
Right.
Okay.
That's what.
All right.
That's the. I mean.
No, I just want to make
local?
sure, because, you have a metropolitan area
Yeah.
too, is that can be a
Right.
local supplier. How do you define that?
Past council meetings, and before I was here, discussions over, trying to purchase something local, and there was confusion amongst members and staff about whether that meant Wichita or Bel Aire.
Right.
Or REAP.
Right.
Right.
So,
REAP.
and then REAP just comes up with a new purchasing policy on automobiles. So I don't know if you're aware of that or not. Maybe you haven't heard that, but that just came out within the last week. So now they have a regional area agreement with Ford Motor Company to buy cars.
I've seen this discussion take place at the Sedgwick County Commission as well, where they were discussing a similar, I don't know if it was purchasing policy, but they were talking about acquiring some product for the county. And initially, one of the commissioners was like, "Oh well, we should restrict, put some sort of restriction from others coming in and only buy locally." And the other commissioners jumped on him and said, "Whoa, you don't want to discourage other people from coming in products that we might want to buy. We might want to buy." And so, that conversation sticks in my mind is like, you got to kind of be careful how you word this so that you're not
You want to give
discouraging
preference.
others from coming in.
Yeah. You want to give preference to your local suppliers, but if they're way out of pocket,
Sure.
why would you pay 200% just to buy from a local supplier?
And I mean, we go through this all in
Right.
our lives anyway, I think.
Oh, yeah.
We all have our other different priorities, but
Your mic's off, by the way.
I think we should have some kind of definition. I don't know. My one thought was maybe like a tiered priority, like City of Bel Aire, then the metropolitan area of Wichita, or I don't know. But on the other side, I don't know if we have to be that specific. I don't know.
When I was thinking about it, to me, I think the price and quality are bigger drivers for me than where it comes from. I think the market works in the way that the market works, and we should let that work. And if all things are equal and we have the opportunity to buy from somebody here in Bel Aire or from somebody else and the price and quality is the same, of course I'd rather buy, here in Bel Aire. But outside of that, I guess for me, that's not a huge priority. I'd rather focus on the price and quality.
I agree with that as well. I mean, I think price and quality should be the number one driving factors. Obviously, if it's equal or it's almost no difference, I'm not saying we wouldn't, there wouldn't be a little bit of influence there. But, I'm not going to pay, any, price and quality should be the main thing for me as well, I think.
I thought I read someplace that there had to be more than a 5% differential to buy outside of local. Am I remembering this correctly, or?
That is a section of the current policy. I think in the recommended draft, I would propose that we strike that. I think it's too specific.
I agree. I tend to, I'm open to discussion, but I tend to not like really specific numbers because maybe that 4.5% on a very big purchase is a lot of money or something. We should. I'm not sure really boxing ourselves in is a good idea. I'm sure there is a situation where we have a good relationship with a local supplier that we buy a lot of things from, and then maybe there's one thing that's a little bit more expensive, but because we're confident, we know, we go with that. But I'm worried about putting really specific things in that kind of puts us in a weird bind.
Yeah, they really, the previous version emphasized the local Bel Aire purchases being a priority. So far, I'm hearing cost and quality being the two drivers that the staff should consider when making purchases. Another one that you haven't talked about is existing relationships.
I'm not sure how to say it, but I think I would approach it differently on preference to the local vendors, that we would reserve the right to purchase locally even if the price is higher, rather than just making a hard, fast anything on it.
I think we're talking about priorities, not hard and fast rules, right? We're not talking about you have to.
Speaks to the 5% again. The local supplier might be a little bit higher, and his quality might be even and everything else, and we might choose to go with the local supplier anyway, even though he's not the lowest bid. I don't know the best way to phrase that.
I think what I'm hearing is just that we have those three drivers there, and sometimes the priorities of those drivers may be flipped, but they'll, for the most part, be the three drivers that people will take into account when making purchases.
Can we reword that first paragraph under vendors to say something I'm just going to summarize what I would like to get out of it, that it says a preference will be given to the City of Bel Aire vendors, taking into consideration best value, and drop the 5%.
where, Mr. Mayor, you on page 3?
Page 4.
Well, mine says page 3. Maybe it's on your draft or page 4. I'm not looking at the draft.
Okay,
So
okay, so in the
look
draft,
at the heading of vendors.
in the draft, that whole.
Okay.
I
Oh, you
recognize.
pulled the whole paragraph out.
Yeah,
Hmm,
all of
okay,
it goes.
sorry.
She wants to pull everything about vendors out, I believe.
Into a separate policy.
Is that going along with some of the things I
Yes.
shared with you?
Right.
Okay. Okay.
So that would actually become more vivid. The things you
Right.
shared would become more vivid and clear in its own policy. That-
Just for everybody's edification, what I shared with Jackie, and I shared it to her somewhat confidentially, some data I do, some things I do in consulting, and some proposals that I do. So if we talk about those details, we'll want to do those confidentially until we come to a consensus of what we want to do as a city, and then we can publish what the city decides on.
Right.
But because I make money off that stuff, I don't like publishing it until it's ready to be published.
Right.
Okay.
And we have to be careful.
Yes. So, but it all falls in line of the purchasing things we look at when we do ISO 9001 certification and AS 9100 certifications. So it's all the purchasing stuff we do there. So those concepts are not proprietary. Just my work product is. Okay.
I'd like to go back to purpose. We kind of skipped ahead. The very last bullet says provide for equal access and opportunity, and I think that should be clarified that we're giving equal access and opportunity to vendors.
Good point. So, okay, I think we've covered that first. Again, I'm following the areas that we need to talk about on the staff report. That clarifying the driving priority, I think we've covered that, and those 3: price, quality, and then local where appropriate could be listed as our driving priorities. Unless I'm hearing something else, we can move to.
I think that's right, and that look. I mean, it's just so complicated. I guess maybe I may be just muddying the water, so maybe we should ignore this. But if I have to drive to a local place and it costs the same as if I order it, and then I don't have to drive there, and I save myself an hour of time or 30 minutes of time, which is the city is paying me, that is like part of the factor too. And I don't think we need to put that in the policy, but I just kind of would like to clarify my thoughts on that. Like that. I mean, how much time the staff has to spend in acquiring something is like part of the whole factor in my mind. And like I said, I'm not sure that, I don't know if we need to put that in there, but like it should be something considered when making a purchase.
No, I agree with that. Efficiency to acquire the product is certainly something to consider. Especially, you have the opposite situation where there might be additional cost if I don't have it today and I need to go drive to pick it up, even if I could get it cheaper by ordering it from somewhere. And so there's an element that plays, I think, into the value of, this equation that we've talked about.
You got to be very careful about the efficiency versus the effectiveness. I actually had a situation with a large corporation. We needed a computer set up for a gentleman, for a new employee. And the IT guy said, well, you had to get corporate approval for the purchase of I don't know, some box he needed or something. It wasn't the computer. It was just some box he needed to make it work on the network. And I said, okay, so how long is that going to take? Oh, he said, well, probably 3 or 4 or 5 days. I said, the gentleman is working right now. We're paying him a wage every hour while he sits around waiting for this process. I said, let's figure out how we can go down to Best Buy and get this box out of petty cash and get it going. Okay? So you got to do those things.
Right, exactly. So I could see efficiency being a 4th bullet, but it sounds like that might be the lowest, like A, B, C, D. It would be.
It plays into value. It's just complicated. That's why I was worried I was muddying the waters, right?
Okay.
It's complicated. Which one's more valuable? Well, if I need it right now, then it's more valuable, even if it costs more. And if I don't need it for a week and I can order it, it's cheaper, then that's more value because I don't have to spend the time driving there and get paid to do it. So I don't know if we, I don't know how we want to put that, but I just kind of wanted to make it clear that, value is complicated. It can be complicated.
And actually, if you list cost as a driving priority, that might actually send the wrong message
Okay.
And you could end up in a situation where, well, it's cheaper if I, buy it from vendor A, but there's a better value if I buy it from vendor B because of the time that it's going to save us, or
Right.
the other factors. It's that the city is better off if I pay a little bit more for it, which plays into the overall value, not just the cost. What are the dollars we're going to write out of the checkbook? Does that make sense?
It does. I think though, when you say take cost out of it, and I know that's not what you're saying, think about a staff person pulling this off the shelf and just running this through their mind as they're surfing what backhoe they should buy. Right now, I think a lot of staff people have in their mind cost is very important to council. And so when you put value there, value is a little harder to define. So maybe I would say possibly leaving cost in there if you want to continue to see those bids being for the lowest cost item, might be the most clear.
Maybe a better term would be cost benefit.
Our problem here is we're trying to solve different types of purchases in 4 bullet points. Because if we're buying envelopes, that's different than buying a street. Okay? Because the existing relationship, we just gave out a bid on a street to somebody that hasn't done work here before. We passed over people with existing relationships.
Right.
So, it's like solving a multi-variable equation here. You can't just go down the list and tick, tick, tick and give up when you got the one you like.
To your point, I think there is a big difference in your commodity items versus your non-commodity items, right? A pen is mostly a pen, an envelope is mostly an envelope, but other things have more attributes of quality that have to be, I think, considered in the value equation.
And so, I'm not sure Councilman Smith was suggesting cost isn't on the list, just maybe there's other things to consider besides cost. So he's just questioning whether that should be number 1 or number 2. Is that right?
Well,
or were
when
you
I
worrying
think
about
of-
the word at all?
Well, when I think about the word value, cost is embedded within the word value, the way that I think about it. Because when I think about value, it's kind of the result of the equation of how much did I pay for it and how much am I going to get out of it. And, what you're left with is the value that is going to be created by that purchase.
How about we just define cost as the cost benefit, or the value as cost benefit?
Yeah. I
Maybe that
think
gets us there.
if we take that, clarify, instead of driving priorities, clarify value, and then strike the rest of that and put those topics that you all have talked about.
Which if we use, something similar to the suggestion in the policy statement, I don't know if we're actually going to even list off these priorities for purchase in the policy. If we can come up with a policy statement that kind of embeds these thoughts into it, maybe that's a better way to approach that than to put a list of, priority for purchases.
I think priority is the wrong word. I would go with considerations or value or something else. Priority, these are not priority order.
Yeah, because they'll rank them. If you say priority, it'll be ranked that way.
Uh-huh.
Oh, that was the number 1 priority right there. It's just right there in the policy.
As they should,
Yeah.
Well, I think our thoughts are probably pretty clear, and best of luck. I'm sure you can.
That's what she gets paid for, right?
Yeah, you should see my strikes and my. So number 2, when are multiple bids required and when are they not? Just again, as starting the framework and discussions with Councilmember Smith and staff, we just started here. I think it will kind of change efficiency if we're going for 2 bids. And the example down here says purchases from 5K to 10K get 2 bids. That should say quotes, because bid is kind of a technical term. Purchases for 10K and above, 3 bids / quotes, because there I can see going after bids. And so let's just take that part of it first. So right now, I think Ted can go into why there are some efficiencies with not having a defined quote requirement for purchases from 5K to 10K.
How often do we evaluate whether or not there's a single or source distributor? Because we got into that with the rec center parking lot, there was only one person that was going to do it the way they were talking about doing it, but then we had an alternative way to do it, and we came up with multiple bids.
Yeah, I would say, can we hold back? Can we just do the 5K to 10K and then come
Okay.
back to that? I think that's a really important thing for you all to discuss too.
There was a concept someplace I read in policy, I think, and maybe it got struck out of here, of the total value of the product over a year's time, 12 months period or something like that. I think that's an important thing to have. And I'm sure that Ty would not go game that system, but people do that from time to time.
I think that's
Okay.
item 4.
I'm sorry?
I think that's item 4.
Is that an item 4?
Yes, that will come up too. That's so that we were all clear on when we're breaking up a purchase, how we're capturing that and whether we're running it through this standard. Ted, can you talk about 5 to 10K purchases?
Yeah, as far as bids, there's no problem getting bids on random things, and I think you guys touched on it with the policy statement is how defined do we want to go with, and how, should I get 3 bids on $1,000? I know that's not what we're talking about, but you can kind of see I'm going through a project right now that's taking probably a good week of my job evaluating bids, talking to vendors. So I think it's important to get the right price. It's just at what level do we want to do it? I'm fine with getting 2 bids from purchases 5K to 10K. The hard part, and I'm trying to think of good examples of what types of purchases those are. Usually those are the last time you signed something, and a lot of times it's something that's just over the department director's amount that I say you got to have Ty's approval. Sidewalk, there was a little bit of sidewalk repair we needed to do around Eagle Lake. I think it was $3,500 or something. This was just a couple weeks ago, and we got a bid for it, and then and we had to go to Ty to get him to sign it. And do you want us chasing all around when we do a lot of sidewalk work? We know those vendors and what they are. Maybe not the best example, but those are the type of things. So we can definitely get 2 bids for purchases from 5K to 10K. I just worry sometimes about the efficiency of how much staff time do you want on it versus the benefit of having 2 bids. And with it not coming up to council, I can file those with the invoice underneath, and if anybody asks, I can present it to them. You know what I'm saying? As far as the process in the finance office changes as well once we start requesting multiple bids for lower amounts. But right now, it's really a lot of discretion of Ty. He'll say, get another bid or not at that level. But it's up to you guys on that. But anything 10K and above, I'm fine with doing 3 bids. When I get to my proposal, you can kind of see a lot of times we request 3 or 4 bids, but maybe only get back 2. So I have some ideas with that being more transparent in our agenda. But that's really all I had, Jackie, is if you want to request multiple bids for lower amounts, and I think you guys touched on it anyway, is let's measure some of the staff time versus cost savings.
So how many purchases from 5 to 10K did we make this year?
It's hard to say off the top of my head. I'd have to do some
2
research.
or 200?
No, it's definitely not 200. It's more than 2. A lot of expenses come in that way, and that's kind of way it's designed. But I can look on my computer real quick.
It would be hard for me to decide, because if we're looking at purchases that are like, I looked this up 6 months ago, and I don't want to re-quote this thing out every time we do it, because we buy this thing on a somewhat regular basis. You don't have to keep getting 2 quotes. So if that's the kind of purchase that we're talking about, maybe we don't need to do this, but maybe we do. So it's just a little bit hard for me to get a mental grasp on the type of purchase we're talking about. I mean, one purchase we made, the sound panels, I think went into this category. So we could have got a second quote on that. That would have been super easy to do. But I don't know what other kind of things we're talking about. It makes me a little bit hard to kind of make a decision on it.
And for things where you're just buying them, right? Like if you're going to buy a computer or something that's commercially available. It's pretty easy to go out to Google and plug in the make or model number or what you're looking for and see from a few different stores what that costs and make sure you're getting the best value for that. I hear you that it is different if you're doing sidewalks and you've got to have a construction company go look at every individual square that's going to be replaced and evaluate and analyze, and maybe there needs to be a distinction there.
And as far as I'm concerned, a lot of our department directors and myself do cross-check about literally every purchase that comes through. It's just a matter of documenting and putting a report out and doing those types of things. At least in my experiences, Bel Aire hasn't, been flush for all the department directors have been here longer than me. And they've been here through the 2008s, and I love it. Makes my job a lot easier. But they constantly look for the lowest price possible because that's the way they're hardwired, as well as quality. So I don't want to. Policies are very important to follow and keep. I just want to assure you that the trust is also there, and that they're always there for the best value of the city. And we can talk about that with my memo.
So do you have a recommendation on that then?
To me, it would be giving Mr. Lasher or his city manager a little more discretion on purchases under $10,000. His ability to require 2 bids, or do you want to set a standard in the policy that requires 2 bids? That's kind of where I lean a little bit more, because Ty and I talk about every purchase that gets in that range, and what can we do within the budget? Of course, we have to stay within our budget. So that's kind of the decision I was thinking, just for the sole purpose of I can see myself and my city treasurer running around trying to find, and again, just the documentation part we take very seriously in the finance department. So if you guys pass something that requires that type, we're going to try to, of course, we're going to do it. And it's a matter of documentation.
We would expect you to do it, and if it were annoying, we'd expect you to tell us about it and how much of a pain that was causing and wasting your time, right? And then we would want to consider changing it. I'm still just not clear what we're asking you to do. Not knowing how many purchases we're making, not knowing. I understand it could be a burden. I mean, I've been at churches where you had to have a congregational vote for a purchase over $250, right? And what do you end up doing? You just stop following the policy because it's so ridiculous. So I'm sensitive to that. I'm just not having a good grasp of it.
I'll quit talking and look up on my computer real quick.
So if you were to turn to the page 2 in the draft document with a red line, that's the chart that will kind of try to capture what you're saying in. Basically, it just kind of, a staff person would use this page to figure out when are multiple bids required or something else, and when they are not. So that's what you're figuring out now.
I guess in my mind, and looking at that table, it has a requirement on the far right-hand column for department head approval, city manager approval, so on and so forth. I think that's ultimately solves that problem, because I believe that is empowering those department heads, the city manager, the council, ultimately to use their judgment on whether that falls into the category or not. And then, so the question is, do we need to specify in our policy what their freedom of judgment is? And I would lean towards being as non-specific as possible, or keeping that as open. Ultimately, we're trusting that the overall judgment is focused on that first set of, currently it's listed as priorities, but value, cost benefit ratio, efficiency, effectiveness, local versus non-local, and all that stuff. I guess that's our expectation, is that judgment is exercised with those early principles laid out in the policy.
So what I'm hearing you say is, so for these smaller purchases, the department head decides, which makes sense, right? The city manager can't approve every purchase. It's ridiculous. But when it gets to a little bit higher price, that $5,000 to $10,000 range, the city manager then does have to approve it. So then there's like an extra layer, at least, of supervision over that. And at least he can say, I mean, this is ridiculous. Go see if you can find something cheaper. And for you, that is an extra layer of that kind of accountability is enough for you. And I think I can be convinced of that. I mean, it's, we're having an extra set of eyes go on something that's a little bit more
I
expensive.
think it kind of answers your question you
Right.
were just asking.
Mhm.
I'm fine with these limits. The only thing that I question, excuse me, is how many times a year we're allowed to do this. I mean, if you can squeeze a whole bunch of stuff in under $5,000, break a contract up, into enough pieces, do you skirt the whole issue?
Well,
I think you
that
fire
was-
the person that did that if that happens.
Some ethics, yeah. So yeah, and if you're talking about, we're going to get to another section where we talk about, breaking up costs like lease style agreement, which Ted has some comments on that. That might ease your concern, but everything you're talking about right there, it does have a lot to do with ethics and, turning in those or watching those reports you get every month or every meeting, consent agenda, appropriations. So there's that. If you wanted more supervision than that, you could pull the reports.
And that's where, and we can talk about that. Every purchase has an invoice. Every invoice has to have the documents clearly laid out. You're going to make $60 payments for the next 5 years. I'm not going to approve that. That goes through our checks as the finance office of the total amount equals greater than your spending ability. You're either going to need Ty or the council, and that's how it goes. Nobody's tried that on my watch, but it's pretty clear. Any reputable business you deal with isn't going to allow you to have installments of $60.
I'm not even thinking so much installments, but just breaking a project up. So I know one of the things coming up is maybe a redo of the council chambers. What if you bid the desk is one and the chairs is another? Instead of doing desk, chairs all together as one project, you could skirt the price limits.
It might work if you do it 4
It
months,
isn't ethical.
4 months apart. But if you're wanting a whole project,
You think you would see it then? And
my department's pretty.
you would see 4 or 5 different
There's
purchases.
Rather
and
than
start
Amazon
questioning it.
purchases. Is that-
So, I guess the struggle that I have is sometimes we try to solve problems when we don't have problems, and and we have policies to give direction. And so I guess my question is, and what Joel had said, you see our other policy, we didn't follow that because there was everything to the penny of what you had to do. And it's like, well, then the efficiency just went out the window because to meet that policy, we were spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to try to save that extra penny. So I think what is beneficial is in this policy and the updates is to where do you think we lack? And I think some of it from what I've heard from Councilmember Smith is, if we're buying something, whether it be a road or grader or whatever, it's obviously over 10,000. Then can we show the citizens that we've done our due diligence to get the best price? And that's certainly easy to do. And I think that's important to have in here that if we're going to spend over, and if it could be over 10,000, it could be over 50,000, whatever that dollar amount is, then yes, that needs to be there and we need to follow that. And I think even the policy statement, which you guys were talking about, but it's very important. I think Jeff had mentioned that is, so when Ted says, did you follow the purchasing policy? Then they're all going to get out, okay, what's the purchasing? Okay, so I need to get the best quality of product for the best value or whatever you say. Well, they're going to understand what that means by what you're saying. Or if it says, I'm going to get the best product for the best price, then that means they're going to look at price. And then first they're going to look at price and say, okay, this is the cheapest, but it is a good quality. Or if you say, what's the best value, they're going to look at, okay, what's the best drill? Is it DeWalt's or is it whatever? Or do you want me to go look at nothing against the Walmart brand, but whatever the Walmart brand is. So you're saying the best value. So they're going to say, okay, so you want me to get a good drill for a good price. Okay, so I'm going to go look at DeWalt and name Craftsman and whatever, because those are good drills, but what's the best price? So I think that helps us, is really just the basic first statement is, if it's under 10,000, we'll buy it, but what is the value you want? And that's what I'm hearing is you want the best value for the best. And there's sometimes, you can get something that's the cheapest and it's the best. But most of the time, the old adage, you get what you pay for. So we want to make sure we get, and that's what I'm hearing from you all. And I think that's what we need to really work on in the policy statement, is what you're saying is we want a good product, but we want the best price. And so let us take that statement for under 10,000 and we'll handle that. And again, that's what we're all here for. I mean, I could say I'm going to buy this and then go to Ted, and Ted can say, well, that's kind of expensive. Is that we've been able to find this chair somewhere else for a better price, and it's a good chair. So, we within ourselves, we have kind of an oversee, or if Ted brings, or one of the department heads brings something to me and says, I want to buy this mower and it's $7,000. And I say, I've seen mowers that, for $5,000. What's the difference? And then they have to explain to me, why do they want this $7,000 mower over the $5,000? And we can do that all internally. So I guess my question is, what's the big concerns you have? Is it over a certain amount that you want to make sure we're getting 3 bids? Or do you want us to document, like Ted said, that you can look at any invoice between 5 and 10,000 and see whether we got the bids or not?
Personally, I'm less concerned with the documentation aspect of it. I'm certainly not looking to create more work for staff.
Yep.
We run with a lean staff, so we need to not create extra work that's unnecessary. My big concern when I started asking the questions was just making sure that the expectations that we seem to all have in our minds are documented and advertised, so that we're being clear in our expectations. And that's why, why I was interested in this. Not that I saw a gap really in our purchasing program, but we seem to have these expectations, and it seems to be that over $10,000 area that we talked about those expectations more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it comes up practically, right? Like in the recent example with the police cameras, right? Mm-hmm. So I wasn't here for that initial council meeting, but it sounded like what came across our table was a single bid for an item, and I presume what everyone was wondering was, well, why is there only one? Why isn't there 2 or 3? Right? It's kind of that simple, right? It's kind of, and if there is one that comes with one bid, if there's an explanation of, hey, we went with one bid because we scoured the internet or whatever and we couldn't find any other, I mean, that's fine to us. Like, that's fine. It's when it's like mysteriously just one, and not that it's intentionally done so, but just the thought is, well, why isn't there competitive? I think it's that simple, right? I mean, it's kind of just, we wanted to make sure, it comes down to what you said, Ty, we just want to make sure that we're spending money wisely, that when we have to make those big purchases, that there's a path to follow of how do we come up with this, right?
And I would say for me, it's not even all about the cost. It's also about, the value side and the alternatives. What I kind of wondered is when we were looking at those body cams, is there better technology out there that can do more for us? And as I dug into some of what the chief found, there is. And I think one of the alternatives that we looked at is better. It's got all these sensors and it does all this automation stuff, but it was way, way, way more money and really overkill for what we need, and that's why that wasn't his recommendation. And so if you don't go look at those alternatives, you don't know what's out there. And, it's possible that sometimes we go look at alternatives and we'll find something that has more features that we can get for almost the same price and can add more value for the taxpayers.
Another thing I've been thinking about too, when we did the panels, kind of the way that went was Tristan had worked working on that project a long time, trying to find a reasonable price. I basically offered to do it, and the amount of money that we saved in the free labor was just like I suggested these sound panels. Frankly, I could have suggested the most expensive sound panels in human history, and it still would have been probably cheaper than those bids. So it was probably, and I didn't get the most expensive or anything, and I did a bunch of research and whatever. But at that time, Ty probably had to think to himself, I have this volunteer who's willing to do all this work for free. I think I'm not going to badger him about what other options there might be on the sound panels, right? And so there's these things you have to balance. And it sounds like Ty, and I wish we could get information. I wish we had that prepared, but I know I've been in situations where documentation gets arduous, and so it sounds like that's a passion of the staff. Jeff, I think your observation of the Ty has to look at it. So there's the second set of eyes, some bigger eyes. I'm fine with getting rid of the 2 bids.
Yeah.
So the 2 bid would it be more maybe an option or just strike it completely?
I'm on Department 9 of 12, and I found about 3 purchases that lie. One was trees. We bought 8 or 9 trees for parks, a water pump for a vehicle. Now, I'm sure they took it. It's one of those things where it's got to be done, and then maybe some. I think Adobe license. Sorry, I was going through it pretty quick, but Adobe license might have went over. But those are the higher end Adobes that help us with marketing. So stuff like that, those intermediate things that I'm not sure you guys will want to spend time on council days talking about. That we have discretion now. I don't want to get confused. We're not afraid to document. It's just a matter of efficiency. That's more what my statement was.
Because like an Adobe purchase, there's not a lot of great other options. I mean, Adobe's like the thing, right? So I don't think you're going to go rebid that every time you redo that. I wouldn't.
So I think what we've kind of found is that really purchases under 10,000 aren't that many. And based on what you're telling us in your policy statement, that's, you're looking for the best value, for the best price. And the great thing that Justin said is we're not necessarily wanting the best price. We want the best product too. So that way they know that if they've heard that some other cities are using this, it's more than what ours costs to replace. But we really should look at that you're willing to look at it. I mean, that's great for them to hear that they don't have to come here and say, this is the lowest price. But they can come to you and say, this is what we are recommend to replace this one truck for. It's $3,000 more, but because of all these reasons, it's the best value and the best quality. So I think that, that's all great. I think that's what we need to hear. It sounds like anything under 10,000, we don't have an issue with anyway. You're very comfortable with the way our process. So maybe we just look at, okay, purchases over 10,000. We want the 3 bids, or if you can't get them, why? Just an explanation of why. Was there anything else, Jackie, on that?
Yeah, so starting at above 10,000,
Can I say one more thing? The last thing, the way we're structured, I know lawnmower came up. I don't think Ty's just throwing out a general idea. A majority of that type of equipment is set inside our equipment replacement fund, which every single purchase out of that. So you'll see some $7,000 mowers, usually they're around 12, come up, and you can dissect, what companies we're looking at for that type of equipment, because that's a non-budgeted fund and it requires council approval out of that fund. So you'll see a lot of those bigger purchases, and that's why I probably can't find too many in that range, is because what do we buy that is that expensive for our day-to-day operation? It's not much. So
does that require council approval because of our policy, or is there something? Because
of the fund structure, because it's a non-budgeted fund. So you could potentially approve something that's $300,000. It doesn't matter because it's a non-budgeted, and that's the budget process is us going to you every time we want to spend.
I got another question before we go on. The purchases under 10,000, Ty doesn't originate any of those, does he?
Very few of them.
Okay, so what we're really saying is all the $10,000 or less purchases have at least 2 people reviewing them. which I'm
yes,
better
at
with
least.
than having number of bids. I just want to make sure we don't have a potential for a single person to go off and do something.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's exactly right.
That's all part of the internal controls of our office. I would see that, and also I'll give you an example. Auditors, they pick out any big purchase every audit and say, show me where it originates, show me everything. So that's another reason why we get audited and why we have internal controls as far as my signing both the 2 signatures every check, that type of thing. So,
And I agree with the statement. I believe all of our employees are doing the best job they can for the city. I don't want to slam any of them. I'm just trying to make sure we don't get in a future situation like Ty says we're worried about the future, but we kind of have to worry about the future. That's what the whole point of policies.
I think we have a clear direction on that.
Okay.
Yep.
So if we can move to the next item I had for you guys, we're still, unfortunately, we're still in the section that's above 10,000. But I did see in some of the models, they had said if it's budgeted, kind of what Ted was going at, and you've gotten multiple bids or all the other requirements are met, it can go on the consent agenda. Would you be interested in moving those up to consent, or do you want to leave it like you've been handling it?
I vote for leaving it alone,
Leave it alone. Okay.
personally.
Just another idea that I've seen.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want council approval on everything then? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
I want to be clear on what we mean by leaving it alone.
leave the policy the way it is, because
What is the policy exactly? Please state the policy so I know what you're saying, that it is you agree with.
okay, so you're talking about the special categories of purchase exempt, right?
Yes, so specifically, I'll state that it's the, for purchases above 10,000, they come to council, they come before council as their own item on the agenda.
Right.
There is an option to move those items up to the consent agenda if they're already budgeted for, and you've gotten your bids, you can just approve it through consent. You don't have to have the full presentation on it. Sounds like you prefer to have it as its own item and consider it on its own merit.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. My only exception to that would be if you moved it up, that it would have to be itemized out. I don't want it just buried in the middle of $2 million worth of spending for the month.
Yeah, I wouldn't change it. I mean, we will change it someday, right? Like, the city gets big enough, there's no way there's cities that are large that are not, city councils are not looking at every 10,000 of their purchase.
Right.
So we will change it someday, but I don't think, in my opinion, today is not that day.
That's still a very significant purchase for our budget.
Our budget is, yes.
Okay.
So I think it needs to be separately itemized and discussed. And, if the discussion is there's no discussion, that's fine. At least we knew about it, and we considered it and voted on it.
Yep, that makes sense. That's clear. Okay, so we move into special categories that I would recommend possibly exempting. The conversation you all have had is really made it clear the checks and balances in place. There are some items that will be above the $10,000 category. I'm sorry. Yes, that will be possibly above the $10,000 category that would typically require 3 bids, as we've talked about, but you can only get them from one source. Those are sole source items, so they're only available from one supplier. I think we put in the policy that you don't have to get multiple bids because it's not practical. That'd be a quick explanation, as Ty mentioned. But just having it there so people know. What would be an example of a sole source item?
Would that be like Microsoft?
Yeah,
Some of our Microsoft.
yeah. Something that only one person does.
We've had that at the CCUA before where we needed a specific brand of pump and there's only
That's
one
what I was thinking.
manufacturer of the pump and you can only buy it from one vendor.
If you
And the
didn't
plant
buy
doesn't
it-
work without the pump. And
Right,
so
and that's the pump.
If you didn't buy it, you're going to do some major remodifications to make the alternative work, and it wasn't going to be cheap.
Right, yeah,
I
yeah.
believe we have 2 examples of that purchases this year. This council is exactly that. I believe the cutter pump that fits with our lift station.
Right.
And when something like that occurs, it's not like Ann's approving it. We have a full staff report, and you ask questions. Why do we want this one? And it's kind of interesting, not to prolong this, but I with my report, I went back and looked at every purchase through the whole year that's on the agenda, and I'd go watch the segmented video, and it was thoroughly vetted. Each time that was only maybe 2 or 1, and it was hard to write a report and be like, I think you guys got it. So those are the sole source would be something specialized.
Mm-hmm. So if we ever, I think also if we ever have to pay, Kansas Gas for something, I mean, some kind of partnership we have.
Those are contracted.
Okay.
Will those items also require city manager approval if they're over 5,000?
Yeah, so the way it is in that situation, it's a dollar amount. So if they can approve up to 5, of course, Ted's going to see it because they're going to be an invoice. Or if it's over 5, then they would have to come to me, whether it's a sole source or not, and just explain.
I just kind of want another set of eyes to say, oh, I heard somebody else is doing this. Now we need to go check.
Okay.
Not, you've been doing this for 6 years, don't bother looking anymore.
Right. Okay. Another very similar single source to sole source is single source vendor. So it's where the city has already chosen a supplier for this category. So for like our body cam equipment, there might be some other brands that fit or that match what we use, but we've already chosen Axon as our provider. So maybe the subcategories of things they provide would be allowed to be approved without multiple bids.
Or if we need 4 more cameras.
Well, I guess that that confuses me a little bit when I think about body cams. I don't think about that as a single source. There's a single source for Axon body cams, but I would think that in 3 or 5 years when our contract renews, we'd want to look at that again and make sure that we are still happy with that as a program.
You're right, but I think that goes to while they're our contractor, if we have to buy a couple more items or if we have to buy something within their suite that seems to make sense, the city has already gone with this contract. Ted, do you have any other example of that? No. Of any?
Truthfully, I off the top of my head, I don't think we have a single sort. Not to say where a lot of times, big state like the state of Kansas has a single source for supplies because they either negotiated a deal with them or something like that. That's what when in the accounting world, when I say single source, that's kind of a negotiated deal. It doesn't mean we can't have it here because it might come up one day, but as far as I'm concerned, off the top of my head, I don't know any single, because even with supplies, we shop around 4 different companies to find the lowest price that we want on paper. So I'm not really, I think it might be important to have, but I don't think we should spend a lot of time because there's really not off the top of my head.
Should we just take it out if it doesn't currently apply? And I don't know.
I think you can. It's interpretation, so soul and seeing.
I think having it that way, if something
to me, looking at it,
it
because
does.
it's single source and sole source are so similar.
Mhm.
I don't know. I think it's a little confusing.
So by taking it out, if something does come up that would fall within that category, now you're
It just goes back up to the
right.
above policy, right?
Which, if you're okay with that, then we can take it out. But I know Chief mentioned, for the example would be, it was something with Axon. If we wanted a special provision for software that they give us, sure, other people compete and do it, but we could we could pay them $7,000 a month or something to upload this equipment or whatever it is, or upload this data or whatever it was. So that's where it seemed to fit. So that, I guess I'm saying there may be an opportunity to use it. If you don't address it, it may come before you.
Yeah, I mean, in that scenario, what I would think is if it's $7,000, we just want to look at the above policy, and I'd want the city manager to approve that, not just the department head as listed below.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm okay taking it out. I think to Justin's point, if the department wants to buy something that's a large amount from a supplier, at that point, should we look at maybe other suppliers? Because maybe that, if we went to a different supplier, Well, and what I'm thinking of is the Axon. If they've got some other type of software that's another 20,000, then maybe we say, well, then let's go back out and look at everybody, because if you throw that same software they have with this other company, maybe now the other company's not as expensive anymore. Maybe they're cheaper now. So that's why I'm fine just taking it out. And
And just to follow, I mean, we have certain, like, I buy quite a bit of our computers from CDWG because I find they have really good 2-day shipping and they are really good price. But I also search my IT guy to make sure he doesn't have the same. So if that's what they mean by single supplier, I don't think they do, but that's just more of what I'm thinking. And the police department has their equipment, that Gall's equipment. But anyway, don't want to. I don't think it's necessary right now at this moment.
Okay, we can take that out. I know Ty mentioned that he had done some research with REAP, and they may have some sort of contract where.
So the interesting thing, and the mayor had mentioned that they're trying to create more value. Talk about value. So REAP is an organization, Regional Economic Area Partnership, that cities and counties belong to in this area. So they're trying to create more value, and so they've negotiated a deal with Ford, so that which we could usually get anyway as a city, or we'll use a state contract or anything. But anyway, but now they're talking about there's vendors that actually go out and do this for you. They'll go out and you join them. And that's what REAP's thinking about joining this group. I can't remember the name of it. There's several out there where they go out and they say, okay, if our members are going to buy 100 pallets of paper, what's it going to be? And then they go to 4 different paper suppliers, and then they get the best price. And then all we would have to do is call up and say, hey, we want 10 reams at this price. They've negotiated it. We're a member. And so we get that. So that's kind of a thing that REAP is looking at. And they haven't done it yet now, but they're negotiating that. And that kind of would help. It's actually an efficiency for us if we were to become a member of that organization, which we could through REAP's membership. And that would kind of help maybe become more efficient, so that we don't have to call around and find out who's got the best paper price. We just go directly to them. They've already done that work for us, and then we order it through there. So that's what REAP is thinking about. Again, I don't think it's going to be. It may be with copiers or something. That could be a $10,000 purchase. They could negotiate with copying companies and stuff, and then we'd have to look at, well, do we want to buy them or lease them? Things like that. So, but that's what Jackie's talking about.
So that would fall in this category, but maybe in the future, if that does come together, we can add it back in. So moving on to leases of equipment, this kind of goes to, I think Councilmember Benaj brought this up, where if we are getting equipment like copier leases, are we making sure those are coming back before council? What's our practice, and what should the threshold be for council to approve leases?
To approve lease, it's same as anything with the total contract value greater than $10,000 will come before you guys. That's pretty standard. I report it. It's that's the way I interpret our current policy, and I don't think we should deviate from that.
Yeah, I think it's good.
And
When you say total contract value, is that
60 month lease, the
annual
total
contract value, or the entire 60 months?
the life of the lease.
Okay.
So if that's good, the next category is change orders. The recommended language here is if it's under 10,000, city manager would approve any change order. If over 10,000, council would approve, unless the project is still within budget or is in the best interest of the city for the change order to be implemented right away. Sometimes this is like street projects or certain things like that.
I think that that's a good policy. The only thing I would suggest that you add to that is that be an advice to the council if you end up with that situation. I realize that's an extremely unusual situation to have a change order of that magnitude come up, but if it would, advise us that you had an urgent need to go on and approve it.
Got it.
Maybe it should actually be ratified at the next council meeting as proposed for the emergency one below.
Yeah,
The way to say advise the council, you know.
Yeah, I think there's a different, the emergency purchases is a whole different world than this situation here in these change orders. I mean, you have and I'll just build a real quick scenario. You're doing a street project and you've got to fix a water main, and if you don't fix it right now, you're going to have a problem, okay? But it's going to cost them $20,000 to go do that. Yeah, but it's in the middle of a project, okay? But this thing has to be done right now. So approve it, advise council of that. The other thing down here under emergency purchase, I think, falls under the emergency operation plan. And I think that's a whole different category. That's when we have a disaster declaration, and we're operating under that emergency operation plan that we approved here.
I don't know. I think about a water main breaking is a pretty big emergency.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I would say he should go on and approve that. Right.
Yeah,
but,
I agree.
But this next category that you got down here, I think, is not that type of emergency. It's a disaster. You had a tornado come through and wiped out. You know.
So I can give you an example of one that actually happened. We had the engineers designed the cul-de-sac project and everything that's involved in that. They were out there, the contractors were out there working on putting the cul-de-sac in. They realized that there was a drain, the storm drain, usually those are in the street, right in the middle of the driveway. And so, the builder's like, well, I don't want this drain right in the middle of my driveway. And so the engineers come and say, oh, yeah, that was a mistake. We can put bars on it or we can move it. And the contractor's there. They haven't done anything. It's going to cost $12,000. And it's Wednesday after the council meeting. And so everybody's there. So that's, I think, where it would be advisable for me to say, okay, that's a change order. Since within budget, it's not going to put it over. The efficiency's there because, we can't tell them to stop and then keep doing something else or go get bids on getting it replaced because they're already there. They're going to be the cheapest because they're there. So that would be, that's one that's came up and I think is what we're talking about in a situation like that where a change order is within budget. It makes sense. And really, is there a need to stop the project so that you can come to council for $12,000? That you lose your efficiencies completely doing that.
I 100% agree with that. That should be a thing. So
that's why I think I like that wording that, and there are times when the builder may be out there and he suggests, well, if we did this on this pipe, I think it would save some money or it would be more efficient. And we've got time to think about it. Then we could bring that to council and say, okay, this is a $50,000 deal. They're recommending it, but in the long term, it's going to benefit because of all these reasons. Then you all then get to weigh in on it. It's not holding up the project, but there's an additional cost that you need to be made aware of. And you could then weigh in and say, okay, yeah, just for the reason we were talking about purchases, okay, that extra 50 is worth it, or no, let's go as designed. We understand that there's going to be an issue down the road, but we're okay with that. So I think if you're comfortable with that, I think that's a good way to handle it moving forward.
Sounds okay to me.
Okay, so last section in the grid is emergency purchases, which I think parallels somewhat of that change order discussion. You have two jobs here, figuring out what constitutes an emergency, and then thinking about if the examples of prior emergencies we've experienced, fits what you're wanting to do. So emergency purchases, what we have recommended is that you can just say the city manager determines an emergency, or the emergency operation plan being in effect constitutes an emergency. It gives a lot of discretion. And then where there is an emergency, we're saying no bids required. And then you would either follow whatever the EOP suggests you do, which they have lots of different paths for purchasing in an emergency. I don't even understand them all. Or if it's something the city manager approved, that would be ratified at the next meeting. Is that okay? Do you want to set spending thresholds during emergency? How do you want to handle the definition and scope of emergency?
Did COVID-19 changes fall under an emergency? Because we had to put up screens and supply masks and sanitizer, and we spent a bunch of money hoping we'd be reimbursed, and I think we're going to be. But
So that's Jack and I were talking about. There's different types of emergencies. You got the one the mayor talked about, where you've got a pipe break, and we're gushing water out. We got people shut off. The COVID thing, you remember it kind of hit, and then we had a little time to think through it. So council then put together a policy plan of how we're going to, and it gave me some authorities to do X, Y, and Z and things like that. So that worked great because we had some time to do that. Or, as an emergency, a tornado or a windstorm or whatever. And so there's kind of different levels and different ideas of what is an emergency. And that's what makes it tough, is for you to think, okay, what is an emergency? And
Well, a year ago, we probably would have never have dreamed of COVID-19 as a possible emergency scenario, right?
Yep.
right, we'd be talking about tornadoes or something like that.
Yep.
Well, all those are emergencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of some sort, yes. But some of them are more urgent than the others. I mean, if COVID really was an emergency, we could have kind of just shut City Hall down until we could have dealt with it. A tornado hitting City Hall is going to be a much bigger emergency, and we're going to need to act immediately to preserve whatever we can, and that's the kind of money he's going to just have to spend. There's no argument with that, and you hope you get it back from our insurance.
So I think we talked through, Councilmember Smith, I'm thinking of a definition that was something that has to be dealt with prior to the next council meeting in order for the city, or even, I don't even like that broadness, in order for whatever that issue is to be dealt with or for the city to function.
I like what it says here, because the ratification with council at next meeting addresses getting it in front of council when they exceeded the limits of the policy, right?
Yeah, and so what it says is the city manager determines an emergency or the emergency operations plan is in effect.
Right.
And then whatever's done there, we ratify at the next council meeting. That's nice and simple, sufficiently vague for this type of thing that needs to be intentionally vague.
I mean, it's,
Well, and we can call a special council meeting if we need to, right? If the emergency happened on Wednesday after Tuesday's meeting, do we have to give 48 hours notice for that, for a special meeting, or?
Not an emergency.
Yeah.
So we could call a meeting an hour from now if we can get everybody together.
yeah, it seems
Reasonably.
like this is the way to go, because in an emergency, you just need to do something. You need to do it. You need to do it now. And if someone would go abuse this emergency, then career over, right? I don't know why anyone would do
Put
that.
this way.
I'm just saying the ratification could happen very quickly.
Sure.
If you
Okay.
have people that would abuse that, I think we got the wrong people in those places. Okay.
So
don't think
I
that'll
think
happen.
just giving freedom to get done what needs to get done is that's what you got to do.
And so, and the other thing that's, as we talk through this, you see the different eyes looking at things. Well, when we get to emergency, it's not just me. I go to the mayor. Like with COVID and stuff, we were talking about, what do we do? How do we want to call me? What do we want to do? How do we want to put this together and stuff? So when I see emergencies, that's not just me. That's talking with the mayor, because the mayor is the the elected governing body representative to run the meetings and take care of the city. And so, and do we need to have a meeting in 2 hours? Again, I'm going to go to him and he's going to say, well, let's get everybody together in 2 hours, or let's wait 24 or whatever. So when we get to that point, emergency is affecting the city, the mayor is going to be involved in it.
And he did that. We had pretty good discussions about things.
So with that, the rest of the changes are just kind of cleanup changes. Again, we're pulling out the vendor policy, pulling out some of the excess words, putting all the prohibited purchases in one place.
One question that I had for you guys is when we think, as I read through the section that talked about, you can't purchase anything if any city employee has a family member or something that's got an interest in that. Have we ever had that type of situation? When I first read that, I was like, of course. And then I got to thinking, well, sometimes like somebody can work here and maybe the city gets a really good deal because they want to do a friends and family thing, or what are the practical applications of that? I guess is that really an issue that we've dealt with here?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
And I think our overriding policy handles that because, again, even if it's a $100 deal, Ted's processing checks and says, well, why did we buy a pair of sun safety glasses for $100? And then that would pull up a red flag, and then Ted would do some research and find out, well, that's because he bought it from his brother. Well, that's not good. And then he would call me and say, well, what are we going to do about this?
Well, the way that I was reading this is that there was no provision for an exception in those cases.
Yeah, I see.
Where that would be a good deal. And I was trying to think about, should there ever be a provision for an exception to that policy of not doing it?
So the way that we've kind of defined it, it goes to what you're saying. Sometimes you may have a relationship with someone where they still are, independently of your relationship, the best purchase option for the city. And we don't want to shut those people out. But under state law, we cannot have someone weigh in or be involved in a purchase where they have a substantial interest. And that's well defined. It's a certain threshold. If you meet this threshold, you just can't participate in the purchase. But what we've added, we haven't shut down purchases that fall below that threshold. So we could still purchase something from someone's brother if that was the best option, the sole source, or the most value. We did add in here a requirement that you guys can talk about. It's under the substantial interest section that employees should report any personal interest, even if not defined as substantial interest. That way Ted and Ty know about it, even if it's just reporting that, my brother owns the company.
It's a small world, right? So as I thought about that more, I was like, it's a small world. I can see where there might be cases where it's in the city's best interest to purchase from somebody who happens to have a relationship with somebody else who works for the city. And
Well, I question the prohibited phrase too. Is that's a legal requirement that we cannot buy from them? Or could we route it through Ty and let him sign for it and still buy from them?
Right, they can't be involved in the purchase because they would be, they'd be gaining.
The vendor could not be involved.
The
No,
employee wouldn't be able to negotiate.
Okay,
that
but if the employee is a department head, they could still go to Ty and say, I've got these 3 bids. This one's my brother-in-law, and he just happens to be the best bid, and Ty could sign off on it.
Yes, yeah, we'd want to kind of go through some technical steps to make sure, maybe have them sign an affidavit and all these other things. But technically, but overall, yes, that's how it would work.
Okay.
I just saw, on page 2, it just says purchase prohibited, kind of very plainly there. And so I was thinking that there was, no exception there, and I could see where there might occasionally need to be some type of exception there.
Yeah, I guess it's written everywhere else, so maybe I could make that section more clear. That would say, purchase by employee with substantial interest is prohibited, or I can play with that language to make sure that it's clear that we're isolating that employee and not that purchase.
Well, I'm just saying we kick it up a notch. Even if it's somebody Ty's related to, then maybe bring it to council.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a good discussion. And honestly, in all fairness, these masks, the chief's daughter made them. And again, it was, you remember, all of a sudden everybody started to wear masks. We didn't have any, couldn't find them. Menards, everybody was out of them. And his daughter had made some for him. And they have an extra pocket, so you can put an N95 in here. So it's double layered. And And so he was wearing it, and I said, wow, because we couldn't find it. I said, where did you get that? That's a nice mask. And he said, well, my daughter made it. And I said, well, could she make some for us? And he said, I'll ask her. And so she did, and charged us like $8 for them. Very nice, heavy quality. Everybody likes them. So we bought some from her so we could, because she made them right away and got them to us. And I still wear it. And so it worked out great. Ted's got his. So, and now we have some other ones like what, that we'll wear in special occasions and stuff, or we don't want something as heavy, but it worked out great for us. So it's, that I think what Justin and John are saying is a good example of, we need to make sure we have that ability to do that.
Okay. You got all your notes, Jackie?
Yes, I saw another place that I need to revise that family member thing based off the conversation in here. But other than that, it's red line. I can take it from here and make these changes. If you have other edits offline, you can send them to me. Based on the conversation, are you comfortable with seeing this again at a council meeting, or should it come back to workshop?
Personally, I think I'd like to see it back in a workshop. I think there was a lot of changes that we're putting here, and I'd just like to see another draft of it.
And before we move on, I assume we're done with this. At some point, this policy is going to make no sense anymore, right? Like if the city of New York adopted this policy, it would be completely, totally just inappropriate. So I just want to encourage staff that at some point this isn't going to make sense. It's 5 to 10K isn't going to be the right number some year. It's going to need to be 10 to 15 or whatever. And I just would like to encourage us to, rather than being like, this is an annoying policy, we hate this, and either we follow it and hate it or don't do it, that we need to continue to update our policies, because at some point this policy will be outdated, and we'll need to, whether it's any of us or somebody's going to need to look at it again and change it. Because I do like us following our policies, but our policies have to continue to update as the city continues to grow.
Do we need a policy on how often?
Yeah.
You guys sound like the federal government.
Yeah, I think the city of New York has like 20 or 30 council members, so I don't think we need to do that. So we're ready to go on to the fee schedule for 2021. Yes.
Right. Just real quick, I'm ready to, we don't have to talk about it, but if you guys do in your spare time want to look at my report, this literally has unless I missed one, but every purchase we made, and we've pretty much, I'm starting to struggle with perception versus reality, so I like to show reality whenever I can. And I think we ran into a workshop discussion about stretching payments into, and that's kind of where the body cam workshop came from, is we really wanted to put stretching installments of a large sum over 5 years. Is that okay? I don't think it was presented as this is what our options are. And then the very next time we had the rec center, and that was one that that got through the system. And at the end, I'll just touch on it real quick. My proposed improvements, I talked to Ty, is we're going to do a check off where I sign off on the agenda packet as well as Ty before it gets sent, to make sure that everything is, all our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. Add no bid information maybe, and that's just a discussion. If you guys, there are a few of the on the agenda, it looks like we only got 2 bids, but if you read deep into the report, it'll say we solicited 4 companies and received no bids from blank and blank. I can add, Kansas Paving, no bid, to the agenda, so it's very clear that you see we solicited 3 bids for that. That's just a few process improvements I had thought of when going through this review. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, but
how much extra work is that going to be for you, Ted. I'm not sure that I have heard you ever say that you have extra time.
Never.
So if you're going to do that, are you going to give something else up?
No.
I
The sign off on the agenda is mainly just me reading the agenda before it gets to you instead of when Melissa sends it out to everybody, because I go a lot of different directions. Sometimes I don't look at the whole agenda packet before it's mailed out. So that's really just a check off. I just want to be 100% sure we're being as transparent as possible to you guys and not having to look through a report to see that we solicited for. So that was the main thing, that we can add a line if you want.
I
But
did like that table that said so-and-so bid for this, but not for this. We solicited from these other two people right there with the table that says that they didn't bid. That at least shows me that we tried to give bids.
And that's really where I was saying is I did this research, and I'd go back and review the tape, and it was really clear that, you know, we tried our hardest to get as many bids as possible, but these were our options. So I think sometimes our perception when we just look at the agenda, it doesn't match that reality of what we're actually doing on the backside.
The only item I can remember where I felt we really didn't get the bids, it wasn't the body cams, because we when it actually got presented, those were brought. The rec center was the only time I could really remember where I thought, boy, it seems like we didn't get a lot of bids here. I mean, maybe there were others, but that's really the only one.
That is
There have been a
the
couple of construction projects, but they were not
maybe,
big dollar projects, or like $30,000, $40,000 projects.
The city truck a couple years ago, that was one.
Yeah, I think that's right. We did
We've
have
had
city
others in
truck
the
projects.
past, but
We've had
largely we do get multiple
Right,
bids.
right.
And, you know, when we don't, we always ask for it. And so,
Mhm.
you know, that's why I just wanted to make sure that we had those expectations laid out. But I also don't think, you know, it's such a huge issue if one time there's something that's on our agenda that doesn't have 3 bids. You know, I wouldn't want staff spending hours and hours and hours double checking the agenda and making sure every I is dotted and T is crossed for us. That's not the best value for the taxpayers either.
well, and that's why I just wanted to be as I just want.
So that's why I wanted
these
to ask
are
about-
hard conversations to have, because we take it very serious, and I just wanted to make sure we prove that we're doing all the best we can.
And some of it's almost like I don't want a person to come up and then we say, oh, go get another bid. And I almost feel bad for them by making them do it, even though sometimes I almost know whatever they brought is the right thing, you know, but I feel like I just would like them to do that beforehand, so then we don't have to go through that dance, even for their sake, or at least explaining why they only had one bid or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's the value of doing what we're doing tonight is like what you're saying is you're telling staff up front what the expectation are. And so that way they know, so it doesn't happen that way that we relay this once it's approved and they understand that I need to go get 2 bids or 3 bids, or I need to explain why I didn't get them or why they didn't bid. And that's very easy to do. And I think it's good just to update it. The nice thing that we appreciate is you took a bunch of stuff out. That was, you know, again, didn't need to be there and just kind of confusing. And so you're right. And we probably should have done it earlier. I mean, when I look back, when I saw what mayor was here, I thought, well, that's been 7-8 years ago. Wow. So anyway.
Well, I think we all have a natural tendency, if you're surfing the internet and you see an article that's 10 pages long, how likely do you read it versus, you know, if it's a page or 2? And so making things as simple as possible goes a long way to helping policies be followed, I think.
Yeah.
Yep, sure does.
So if we're ready to go on to the fee schedule, council's made a few changes, I think this year and last year on some of our fees. Typically we look at updating our fee schedule every year, but somehow time just flies. Well, and then of course we all know about COVID hitting in March, and so we wanted to get started on reviewing the fees that we have, talk to staff and see if they had any suggestions, or, you know, some of the fees, are they covering what our expenses are if they need to? And so in your packet was the highlight, and I'll let Ted kind of talk about what the expectations are. And also you guys may have some thoughts and looking over, you know, what are the fees that we charge for and how much do they generate and things like that. So Ted, do you want to talk about what your changes?
Sure. Really some cleanup this year. I highlighted some things. I know it's hard to read. I'll try to work on getting that improved a little bit. Animal license, as you know, we removed in kind of mid 2019 or 2020, sorry. And that was about $3,000, but it is a small fee. That's just one of the highlighted areas, what we did in the past. Let's see here. We removed daycare licenses. We haven't used that in many, many years. I'm not sure. We revamped the business license code, and it just falls under that, so we deleted that. Coin-operated amusement parks. We have, again, we really, I think, took the council's lead and started to recommend eliminating these small things that never get used that just bog up a spreadsheet. That makes sense. Of course, the cereal malt beverage table changed, and that goes straight from the state of Kansas. I believe that's what Melissa said. She's our expert, our city clerk, because she had to deal with Dollar General and their stuff. Fireworks display, I believe we added or adjusted.
What did it used to be? I see it's 250.
I'm trying to think. I didn't have the. I think maybe it was just highlighted. I'll double check. 1 second. Sorry.
Is that a recommendation to do what?
I don't think so. Was it?
For public display.
Yeah. You approved one this year for,
We charge ourselves a fee.
Yeah.
I waived that.
They didn't pay the city for that? The city didn't pay the city for that?
Yeah. Does yellow highlighting mean recommend to eliminate? I guess. Maybe.
What does the yellow highlight mean?
I hope yellow means change. Although it doesn't look like the garage sales have really changed.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about the garage sale one at some point.
Yeah, and that yellow means changed or open to discussion. Does that make sense? Sorry, it's
Trying
kind
to
of
draw our attention.
draw our attention. That's pretty much what it means. And red, of course, means eliminate.
Well, I'd like to see us just get rid of the garage sale fee at $2 a day. It feels like a nuisance fee to me that should just go away.
I would
Not
agree
the
with
permit,
that, but
but the fee.
every once in a while, yeah, okay, maybe that's fine.
Just like the
You
dog
still
tag,
get the permit.
$0 fee.
Because we've had these situations come up. We had one in my neighborhood a few years ago that they had the perpetual garage sale going on. I mean, it was constant for months. So I don't want us to get into that situation. That's a regular business. They need to go get a business license and do it that way. Do it the right way.
Well, if we're going to do garage sales, we need to have enforcement on Saturdays also, because that's, some people know they can get by with having them on Saturdays because nobody comes around.
Yeah, it happens.
I see a big smile up there. What's that about?
So are we talking about, I don't, is there a way to solve the $2 a day, getting rid of that and that problem at the same time?
Yeah.
Well, we still have the requirement in the ordinance that they have to get the
Yeah.
permit. Okay, you just don't charge them.
$2.
Just not charging them $2
Which is the
because
same as we currently have with the dogs.
Right.
You still need a license for your dog. You just don't pay a fee for it.
Right.
You still
Right.
fill out the form.
yep.
Do we know how
Okay.
much that brought in, garage sale permits?
I can look it up.
While you're doing that, maybe Jackie can help us understand a little bit on this retrieval and inspection of public records, record request. I remember a few months ago you were telling us about something the Attorney General was doing in that area, and did that ever come together, or is it we still on our own on this?
Yeah, we did submit our comments. The Attorney General was trying to fix a price, or I don't want to say it like that, but he was trying to
Trying to set a fee schedule.
The words just came out all wrong. The Attorney General wanted to limit the amount that cities could collect, trying to set something that would be reasonable across the board. And we've submitted our comments that the price should be accurately tied to the cost of our staff time very firmly said that.
Mhm.
Several other cities did as well. We haven't heard back on those comments, which may be a good thing. Maybe they got so many that they've decided to go back to the drawing board and come up with some other recommendation for what might be reasonable based off of some of our comments. The update was, I think is it $20? Is that what?
It says $20 per hour, yes.
$20, yes. We just cross-checked that with the cost of staff time and just made sure it was updated. I don't know off the top of my head what it was previously, but this is a more accurate cost for the staff time to retrieve those documents.
It seems
Does this include your time redacting?
This does not.
Okay.
That would just be like a baseline charge. Anything over and above or requiring special skill or time or a special department involvement would be more. But for like just a standard document retrieval, that would be the baseline cost.
Can you give us some real life examples of these requests that would fall in this category?
Let me see that. Let me see your fee schedule too. I apologize. I looked at this a little while ago. Okay, the first page under general fees.
Retrieval and inspection of public records, parentheses, record requests.
Yes. So that is just, so if someone were to need to come in and look at, sit at a computer and look at our previous water bills for a certain area of the city, and it took them an hour time. That time to sit and actually access that information and inspect that information would be rolled up in a $20 an hour charge. If someone were to request a document, that $20 an hour charge would be reduced to, I believe, 15-minute increments or less to properly match the amount of staff time that it takes Melissa to prepare that, to redact it, sometimes to copy it and to make it available. So
in this case, we'd be charging someone a fee to sit at our computers, use their time to look at the records.
right, to retrieve and inspect. Now, there is a separate fee for producing copies.
Yeah. I see.
And the fee can be very different for, we don't have to, but sometimes when we make information available in a disk or some other format, that's all tied to the time and the format that we're putting it in. So that's a baseline fee. I can get you, we have a standard statement that every time someone submits a request, we give them a standard statement that explains the fee setup, and I can send that to you all and make it available to anyone in the public that would request it. But it explains a little better than I am right now what the fee might break down to look like.
How many of these requests do we get a year?
We are getting quite a bit.
From who?
The
I mean,
public.
not what people, but what kind of requests? The citizens, media, state?
Yeah.
Who?
We're getting, right now, we're getting a lot from citizens, of course. We've gotten a few from the media, but last year we had a media project that really took a lot of high-level staff time. So Chief, myself, in preparing and redacting and pulling that information. But we're probably getting, I think, gosh, by April, we already had like 15 this year. And this is kind of an additional duty for the clerk, so it takes time to retrieve the request. Sometimes this falls under our criminal cases, so our criminal clerk would go to the water tower and pull the cases or document needed.
It might be interesting to get a staff report that kind of breaks down the request types and quantity for this.
Okay.
And what my thoughts are there is if we're seeing a lot of requests for a specific record type, that might tell us that the public's interested in records being available in a different way, and maybe there's something that we can do there from a technology perspective to improve that experience and transparency for the public.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be good. I mean, because there's some ways in which I'm trying to balance, we get a bunch of requests, so it takes a bunch of staff time, so that costs money. But then I'm balancing that with, transparency shouldn't cost money. You shouldn't have to need money for the government to tell you what they're doing. So I'm kind of balancing those two things in my mind. And I realize if some big news organization asks you for a crazy amount of stuff, and you're going to eat up weeks and weeks of your time that probably can't be free. So I'm kind of trying to think about those two.
It's not fair for the taxpayers. to pay
Of
for
course
that,
not, right? Yeah. So maybe what Councilman Smith is suggesting might help us think through that a little bit more. Maybe we won't do anything. I don't know.
I have some answers for you too on other things, but majority of stuff I hear from my staff are, hey, when was my roof put on? I need a request for the permit that if they pulled a new roof, stuff like that. So it's not all doom and gloom, guys.
and so we would charge somebody like for a 15-minute, we charge them $5 to go pull that permit.
That would be more for copy.
Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of times you'll see
$2.
You'll see sometimes if it's something that's so readily available, the city has discretion to just give that over.
Okay.
And I'm not going to say that that's what happens. There are a bunch of factors that play into that, but the discretion is there. And a lot of times, Councilmember Smith, to your point, that if it's something we can send them a link to the website, a million times easier. That's what the clerk is going to do. And often those don't even make it into the request category. They disappear before they become a request.
Fireworks public display is a new. It wasn't on the current finance schedule, and our city clerk sent me a lot of these changes, so I could report on that when it comes up, and we can either strike it or keep it in. But sometimes it's a matter of, hey, you need to have some kind of permit for a public display for fire purposes or stuff. So I don't want to say this was dictated by, this is just because we started having fireworks displays. It might be something greater than what we decide. So I'll do some research on that. That one slipped through.
So we have, just related to that, we currently have a policy for that. So if an organization wants to have a public fireworks display, there is a city policy on that.
Yeah.
Right.
Does
I
it
don't
come
know if
with
it has
a
that
fee?
fee in there.
I don't know does it come with
I
a
know
fee?
it has the insurance requirements and all that in the policy.
And maybe that was a follow-up. Do we know if that came with a fee?
I believe so. I believe the application.
And any kind of policy would probably say according to the fee schedule, not a set fee. So that's probably what Melissa does a great job of connecting the dots. So that might be it as well. Someone asked earlier garage sale permits. In 2017, we collected $48 for garage. In 2018, we collected $90. In 2019, it was $75. And then 2020 so far was $35. So
Probably spent more collecting that than we collected.
so that's that fee. I would, one thing I didn't highlight that came up, and it's constantly come up, that I want to bring up is vendors and peddler license. Now, there's a lot of confusion in the door-to-door salesmen. I consider them peddlers, but sometimes they classify themselves as vendors. So because they want $50 for 30 days, so I don't know if we do a door-to-door salesman license, or does that, as far as defining what we want, or do we just classify it both as vendors and peddlers? And it's right under the first page in the red. It's right under that. My gut reaction would be to just have vendors and peddler license and have $15 a day. $50 for 30 days or $150 for the year, and they can take their pick on that unless someone has we need them classified differently. But if you look at the memo, we've collected $200 this year from it, $255 in 2019, $300 in 2018, $700 in 2017, and $800 in 2016 from these two lines. So like you said, for the time, there's more arguing going on when the company that wants to sell either roofs or I'm trying to think what was the other big. There's a few bigger ones, and it's just the matter of it'd be nice to clean it up from administration side.
So when the Girl Scouts want to sell Girl Scout cookies, do they need to get this license?
I think we dealt with that situation maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Because they're a nonprofit, they have to submit a letter that is tracked, like Chief would track that they are a nonprofit, and then they're allowed to.
I think we created a policy on that a couple of years ago.
I think we had that discussion. That's why I brought it up, because it's just, So I think combining them as one, because you're just splitting hairs in definition, and you just asking for an argument.
Yeah, I know our code just specifically, I'm trying to look at it now, specifically references peddlers in some form. So I think we put them in the same category, but still had both words there.
I can have both. I just would prefer the fee amount, and I should have changed it. I'm sorry. $15 a day, $50 for 30 days, and $150 for the year on both.
Great.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So it gives them
Just make the dollars the same.
The
Have they
dollars
line,
the same.
make the dollars the same.
because that's where the arguments occurs. Okay. We'll keep the definers the same.
And just to be clear, so soliciting door to door, selling something without those fees are considered solicitation, which is forbidden in our code, right?
Correct, without a proper permit.
When we give somebody one of those permits, do they carry it with them?
They have to, yeah. And we do a simple background check on everyone as well.
I was going to say, is this per person?
This is kind of a big issue. We get a lot of calls. Our police officers check a lot of these. So as much as, I say we don't collect much on it, it's important that we do have this type of licensing.
Especially if we're doing a background check. I know background checks aren't free usually.
Yeah.
So
They're $10
Is this fee per person or per company?
per person.
Okay.
So when they come to my door, I can ask them to show me that license?
Yeah. And if not, then you go to City Hall.
I know just in my own experience, this can be an issue sometimes with people coming up selling door to door, and it can be a nuisance. And I don't have it at the forefront of my mind to think about, hey, do you have your license? But that's one of those things that maybe I know. Just having this conversation and talking about this is reminding me, oh yeah, I should, next time that guy comes to the door selling something, I should ask him that. But also I think that's just a good thing for all the citizens to be aware of, is that they can actually say, hey, do you have your, vendor license or peddler fee or not fee, but the license? Do they have the license? That's a good question to ask if someone's knocking at your door or trying to sell you something. Because I've encountered that quite a bit. I'm not always prepared for what I'm going to say,
Can we make those licenses like a hang tag that they'd have to wear? Well, that way when they come to the door, it says, I'm good for all of 2020, or I'm good for today. Has a specific date on it, and the guy can just look and say, hey, you're not supposed to be here. I'm going to call the cops on you.
Give them a peddler's mask.
Ted's taking down the amount of time it would take to make all those.
Yeah, so a lot of these types, they might have 10 employees. It's not usually just a single guy going around. It's a company that signs up 10 people. They hit a neighborhood and they leave for the day. I mean, it's pretty strategic kind of. Where did the hail fall usually? They have the hail maps on insurance, and they'll go straight to those doors and then they'll leave. That's kind of the MO of those types. So I don't know if I want a lot of people going up to Tristan's office, getting a laminated badge and coming back down. Or would you, are you saying just is there
I'm saying, should we make a requirement that license is visible when they show up at your door? And how would we enforce that then? That's why I said maybe just a badge or something that says I'm Bel Aire certified peddler.
for the year license, maybe we can do that. I don't know if the day.
I guess that's an interesting thought, but my initial reaction is no, probably not. I think them having a folded up piece of paper that's a license in their pocket is good enough for me. I just want to know that they went through the process
Yeah,
to
but
get
you have
vetted
to ask
somewhat.
for it and pull it out and read it. And,
Well,
it's not something you can see from 3 feet away. It's what I'm.
The frequency of this license being issued is pretty infrequent
low.
from the,
Yeah,
from
I
the
mean,
revenue that you're seeing. So I don't
Under
think
1,000.
it's something that's worth going after.
I know in my neighborhood, there's a lot of folks that go door to door, probably more than is accounted for by this revenue.
Oh, yeah.
And so I suspect there's a lot of non-compliance in this area. And so I really appreciate Councilmember Elshoff's comments on, hey, this is something that probably people don't know about. Maybe we need to make this publicly announced again on social media or something, just as a public service announcement.
yeah. And I know I live just off of Oliver, and across the street is Wichita, and I'm sure some of those guys just think they're still in Wichita when they come into my neighborhood, not knowing that they're in another jurisdiction and different rules apply, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think some kind of public, I don't know, something educational, like a simple banner on the webpage or something. It could be something, I don't know if you guys are collecting things in the future to kind of potentially educate the public on. This isn't an urgent thing, but I think it's beneficial because it kind of empowers the citizen that they can instantly vet that person at their door by just asking them to see the license. And if they don't have it, then go to City Hall, right?
Yeah, because obviously, I've got to know, and we'll work on that because I think it's important. Someone comes to your door, I think people should know that they can ask, can I see your license? And if they refuse to give it to, or they don't have it, typically it would be the issue, then they would just walk off. Well, then at that point, that person could call 911 and say, hey, there's someone soliciting, has no permit. The police would hear about it. They'd go out and tell them to leave. But if they have one, a valid one, then we don't want the people calling and saying, hey, there's a guy soliciting, tell them to stop. Well, they've got a license. So I think that we'll get some information about that, they have to have them and certainly ask to see it when they come. Because I think that would be a good for the police so that they're not getting called all the time. But if there's someone breaking the rule, they do get called. So, yeah, we'll work on that.
And there are a host of exceptions, so getting that information out would be helpful, because someone hanging a flyer on your door doesn't need a license in Bel Aire, but of course knocking and other categories of exceptions, so we'll want to get that included.
I'm going to predict that someday it's going to be illegal to go door to door. Maybe I wouldn't be surprised if there's already cities that just don't allow it. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I mean, that's
been around
something
for a long time.
that can be done. I mean, that would be required.
Used to
I don't know,
see
it seems like that almost infringes on people's, almost free speech rights to go door to door and talk to people about things. So.
You used to drive up to cities at the city limit and see a sign that said Green River Ordinance Enforced. And what that meant was you could not sell door to door.
I have a neighbor in my neighborhood that has a motion censored sprinkler that activates when you walk up the sidewalk.
His neighbors must love that.
I discovered that accidentally. So there are creative means of dealing with that, I guess.
Did council have any other thing that jumped out at you other than what we had mentioned? Was there some fees that you thought were inappropriate or ought to be adjusted?
There was the fee we ran across with these backflow preventers, they have to be rebuilt or replaced. And it was like a $50 fee for I don't remember what the fee was for. Was that for
There's a $5
permit
registration
fee?
fee.
That's just the inspection. That's just for the annual inspections. But if you have to replace it, there's a different permit fee
I
for
was going to
that.
ask how many households we even have in Bel Aire, because what percentage of people are paying these fees?
Right.
So, to answer Mayor Badaj's question, the sprinkler permit, $50 for the rebuild, I believe.
Permit to rebuild.
The permit to rebuild, because that involves involves an inspection, so that involves time. They're using user fees or charge type scenario. The one that was suggested was the $5 annual backflow sprinkler report. Just the $5 to have it checked. So you would call a company, have them check it. They would give you a report, and you would go pay $5 to the city for the filing purposes. That right there is about $4,500 into our water fund every year.
So I know when we talked about this before, I'd asked if it would be possible to understand how many certifications we got that weren't accompanied by the $5 fee, to know, of the non-compliance, how much of that was driven by the $5 fee not being paid. Were we able to get any of that information?
I haven't heard that question. I do know when there is a fee that's owed, we try to contact the resident and retrieve the fee that's due for the filing. So we've done a lot of work in educating on backflows this year. That's the hard part with this is, do I want to get rid of it? Do I don't? We've already educated for the last 2 years. so now once we have everybody compiling, now if we cut everything away, then really we didn't do anything.
Well, and we are going to, I know we talked about in our last workshop, we're going to change the ordinance on how backflows, the rule. We're changing everything about the rules of backflows now again. So there will be some re-education that occurs through that process.
I think you're going to see your fee collections drop in half on this.
Yeah, because it'll be every other year for testing.
Right. Yeah, you'll see. You're already going to see your fees drop in half. So,
Still, how many
but that's-
households do we have in Bel Aire? Total households?
There's 3,500 water meters in Bel Air, so I don't.
So we're looking at about
And that's an
25% are
estimate.
paying the sprinkler fee.
How many?
About a quarter of them are paying the $5 fee then.
But not everybody has
Has a sprinkler? Yeah.
I know, I'm just wondering how many of our residents, out of the total residents, have to pay the sprinkler fee? And the answer is about a fourth of them. And it's generating slightly more revenue than the dog fee that we got rid of. So I think we should get rid of that $5 fee just because.
I think so too. It's a $5 fee.
I don't think $4,000 makes a hill of beans to our budget.
Should we wait till we change? If we're going to make a bunch of changes anyway, I would.
That's possible,
No,
but
maybe-
I'm just stating I think we should get rid of it.
I'm sorry. I resonate with the explaining to everybody and then re-explaining. I mean, that is just a big headache, and I think we're unfortunately going to do that again. So I agree with you, John, but I could be talked out of it if it's just such a headache that it's not worth it. I don't know.
Well, I want some more explanation on why we need to charge $50 because I had my backflow rebuilt. I already paid $200 to somebody to do that. Now why do I have to pay the city $50?
Yeah, I think you mentioned an inspection, but mine was rebuilt this year, and I don't believe anybody ever came out and looked at it.
Yeah, and we have a requirement that person who's doing that work already be certified to do that work. So I don't understand an inspection of that. Maybe it's needed, but I'd like to understand that.
You have a lot of master plumbers, and the reason you didn't see the $50 because we charge it to whoever pulls the permit to rebuild, just like you would
I didn't see anybody come out to inspect it.
No. I'm sure I can double check with
How
Keith,
could
but they're
even
not going to
come out
knock
and inspect it? They
they'll
can't
either-
inspect it. They'd have to tear it apart to see it had new parts in it. The only thing they can do is do a pressure test on it to see if it meets pressure test.
Yeah, well,
That's the only inspection you could do on a backflow.
And I'm not an inspector. I can ask.
I'm going to relate a slightly different issue that happened to me in Wichita about inspections. I had a electrical box replaced, and I could not get KG&E to hook up my electricity until I had a city inspection. I finally got the city inspector out there 2 weeks later, and you know what he did? He walked down to my basement, as far as from me to you. He saw there was a new box in the basement. He signed it. He never even opened it to see if it had wires in it.
Yeah, but he's liable. When he signs that, he's liable
I'm
for
just
it.
saying,
That's what the cost is.
He really couldn't inspect it. He could look in there, maybe even see breakers, but he still couldn't tell if anything was hooked up. So there's really the inspection process.
But that's a
It
different
was-
argument than
was
having
sorely
the
lacking.
inspection, right? I mean,
He didn't inspect anything, is what I'm
but
saying.
that doesn't
when they come
matter.
in, I know we've seen pictures of some things where the inspector's gone in and seen that the water tank's not hooked up right. That's something he can visually inspect. Whether or not the wiring goes to the tank correctly, whether or not the gas line's correct, he can do all that visually. But a backflow preventer, there is no visual inspection. There's nothing he can do. So I don't see any point in charging for it. And like Jim said, the guy that had to do it's already licensed. So either we trust him or we don't trust him.
And so you're saying it's a waste of our inspector's time to even go there, right? The whole
Yes.
process is arbitrary. We're wasting the city's inspector's time to go there. We're wasting the money to pay. We should, we're saying we should just you have to have a licensed person do it, and that's just the best we're going to be able to do because you can't visually inspect it
But
anyway.
even
They're
if
not
we-
only licensed, they're also certified
Right.
to do backflow specifically.
But even if we allow residents to rebuild their own, it either works or it doesn't work. There is no visual inspection that can be done. So if you're going to inspect it, you have to go out there and test it for backflow. You'd have to pressure test it. That's the only inspection that could be done.
And when we have a homeowner do it themselves, is our inspector going out and doing that? I mean, I guess it would make sense to at least do that if the homeowner is doing it themselves.
Well,
Yeah, but
I mean, we're
did
kind of
we
getting
make
far
that
afield
provision?
here, but
I don't know.
I thought we landed on that at the beginning of September when we talked about it, right?
Yeah, I would say I have to. That's on my list. I have to go back and revise that ordinance to match your conversation, which some of it is happening again. Your conversation in workshop. So if we can hold off and make those changes at that time, make changes to backflow, any backflow items at that time, and then we can go back and update the fee schedule because we'll have an expert explaining what those inspections are for. You'll see the
Okay.
changes you've already made.
So actually, the idea to start the discussion was, if you noticed, it's 2021. So my goal was to have this ready so January 1st of January you could approve it. And so the thought was that we would give you some ideas, and then you would, just like this one. That's a great. Why are we doing that? And so then we would take these notes and then go back, and then we can go to Keith and say, Keith, what do you do when you go and inspect? What do you do? And and he can say, well, I look at it and make sure it's hooked up. And okay, so you don't do anything? No. Well, council suggests maybe we not charge that fee because you're really not doing anything. And he would say, I understand, that makes sense. So, So if it's okay, you tell us what you think are nuisance fees or what, maybe we shouldn't even have. And then we could then talk because, we don't do none of us up here do inspections. So
I would like to understand that one better.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
And
so,
the comment was made. I'm sorry. Go on, finish what you said.
Oh, no,
Go
I
on,
was just
clarify something.
summing up that you tell us what you think, what you think's a nuisance or why are we doing that. We'll put that information together, and then maybe next month or before you guys adopt it, we'll have some answers for you.
Okay. Good. Comment was made about an inspector not looking at anything, and I understand what Councilmember Elshoff says about he's still liable for it. I hope we don't have any inspectors doing that. I hope they're really looking at things and make sure that they're right, because having been an inspector myself, and I've not done building inspection, I've done parts inspection, assembly inspections, those kinds of inspections. It's amazing what you find, okay, and what is overlooked. So please make sure that they're always doing it. And I don't have any reason to believe they're not, but I just don't want to see that situation that Councilmember Welch had just described.
Yeah.
I'd hate for us to have that situation.
And I don't hold Keith's hand, but I do know
Right.
that he does inspections because I get calls from builders who say, "Why did I have to do this?" Because it's in the code, and he's telling you have to do it. And so I know he does them because I get complaints that
Right.
they have to do something with the code that he told them to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll look at those two, the fee for the $5 filing or the annual fee, which is going to go to every other year. Look at the $50 rebuild. Was there anything that jumped out besides what we've done so far?
well, Mr. Smith
Oh
brought
yeah,
up the
garage sales.
Yes.
Okay.
And we said we were going to combine peddler and vendors so they were the same cost.
Okay.
Is there another type of license similar to that peddler vendor thing, or is that really all the kind of type of door-to-door things that we require a license for?
Door to door it is. Now we do have a business license.
Right. And
But door to door, it's just
And the vendor is all. I mean, it's a pretty big, a food truck. Yeah, different things like that are all considered vendors. So that's a big classification. It's just peddlers tend to want to have $50 for 30 days, not that $15 a day. So. They call themselves vendor, and I have an argument with them, and then I end up just saying it's not worth it.
Let's get you out of that.
Just charge them and let them go.
Those are things we appreciate you telling us about. These things. We should fix those things.
They're at least nice enough to come in and get the permit. So
That's right.
try to be
Yeah.
nice to
And
them.
really, that's how I judge it. I was like, "You're here, man. I appreciate it."
Any other discussion on this?
I want to go back to the liquor.
No, not tonight.
The reason we're striking the ones in red is because state law has changed. Is that the case?
That was my understanding. Again, like Ty said, I can have Melissa write a paragraph on, but our expert liquor from the state made these changes, and I imagine that's what it is.
Just wanted to confirm that
Yeah.
because it seemed kind of arbitrary just to see it there. But if there's a reason behind it, that's great.
Yeah, usually the state does CMBs and liquor licenses. They have the requirements, and then they also get a fee. So they set the fees, and then we have to remit a certain amount to them and stuff. So yeah, a lot of those fees related to alcohol, they set them.
So these are just pass-throughs for the city? City's
Yeah,
not
a lot,
seeing any
yeah.
revenue out of these at all?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to
Do we have
add something
anything
for
specific?
ourselves?
I was going to say, I think we've only had one. So I'll let you know.
So far. We've had some in the past, but yeah, I was kind of wondering what the big deal was, considering we do only have one vendor of alcohol.
Okay, so I will make those changes, and we'll get some more information to you. And then if you have any other suggestions as you're looking it over, please get with me or Jackie or Ted.
All right. Very good. Thank you. We need to move on to the gas service franchise agreement and review those. There's, I think what we have here, and Jackie, please clarify this if I have this wrong. We have the just expired agreement and then the proposed draft of the new. Is that correct?
Correct, the one that will expire, I think it's good until actually May, but
Oh,
the
is
one
it-
that we're,
It's not up yet.
Right.
Okay. I
But the
thought I
one-
read it expired, but okay, that's fine.
so, did you want?
Jackie and I kind of tag team this one. You guys, I think it was the Westar or Evergy one earlier this year. You all went through that. They're all typically the same, but what they are is a franchise agreement, which, as we talked about, it gives the private utility. We have right-of-ways and easements for public utilities, but we also allow private utilities to use those. And in exchange for being able to utilize our easements, make sure that they're kept mowed, that their permits are required when somebody's going to do something in the easement or their permit, et cetera, they pay us an annual fee. And so if you read through the ordinance, basically the agreement, you looked at the previous one that we had, and then the one that's proposed, it's got the red lines in it. And so some of the things that you see redlined are things that Jackie and I requested. One of the issues that I always have a concern with is they want to go as long as they can. And I think they proposed 20 years. We tried to get them down to annually or every 5, 10 years. They don't like that. The big reason they don't like it is because these corporations like Kansas Gas, Evergy, they have to go out to the bond. They have to issue bonds to do improvements. And so when investors are looking at buying these bonds from Evergy, they want to make sure that they have access to these easements that they use for long periods of time. It makes them nervous if they have 5-year agreements everywhere. So that's why they try to push it as long as they can. From our standpoint, the concern we have is, well, that's a long time we're tying up this agreement with. So we were able to get them down to 15. As far as the franchise fee, we get a % of that. We proposed going to 6, and the reason we did that is because that's what Wichita, that's what their rate is as well. So that's the market. Then we also, the other issue is that since this is a 15-year deal, can we look at it and make changes to it? And specifically, if there's the cost of maintaining or purchasing our right-of-ways go up and there's an ability to address some additional funds, we want to be able to open this up and do that. So you can see that they also a reopener provision. They added that, which either one of us could, the city or the company, could renegotiate it after 5 years. So it's not every year, but it's after 5 years. And really it's just to negotiate what the fee is. And basically that was the changes that we proposed. And Jackie, did you have any concerns with the rest of it?
No, I would just say, where we started, and a lot of this has to do with Ty's long-term experience and kind of having seen a lot of these franchise agreements and knowing what angle to come at them from, because honestly, when they said 5%, I kind of looked at cities of the second class, we're getting 5%. He pushed for 6, we got the 6, which is a huge difference once you add up those fees over time. So I guess we would have started out with a typical agreement for a second class city. We are kind of doing better than most second class cities with the way that it's written now. Being able to open it up in 5 years gives us, as legislation changes, we're not having to wait out 15 years to catch up to favorable legislation. So I think, with the changes here, we're in a better position than cities our size.
So what I remember about the franchise fee discussion from Westar, I think, or Evergy, whatever they're called now.
Evergy.
Evergy, is whatever percentage we negotiate in this agreement isn't them giving us that money, really. What they do is they take and they put a line item on everybody that lives in the city of Bel Aire's bill that is equal to 5%, 6%, whatever percent is in this contract, and it's a line item on their bill that they pay every month that then gets passed through to us. So when we go from 5% to 6%, we're effectively raising the rates on the people that live in Bel Aire for their gas, right? Is what I remember from the Evergy discussion. And so I guess I don't know why they care what that percent is.
I can double check on that, because I remember her pointing out where that, because our concern was kind of like, was more, it was more how that fee is billed and whether we're collecting. If they don't collect, we don't collect, trying to just make sure that we didn't have any issues like that, because as pandemic has happened, people aren't paying their bills. Should that be passed to the city? That's kind of what we focused on. So we looked at the bill to make sure that if it went to collections, our item was there. Now, what I didn't look at is, was it at 6% or was it just a fee from their amount? So I can do some research and find out and confirm, unless someone here knows from.
Well, when I've been in that situation when we send a bill to collection, it's just the total bill. It's whatever whatever the total amount is. You don't usually look at all the details and say, oh, is this, or is this that?
Pulling out our-
It's whatever the total amount is, that's what you send to the collection agency. So hopefully you don't
I
have
the
to do that
same
very often.
question as Mr. Smith. I don't know why they would care what the percentage is, why they would even offer something different if it's just a pass-through.
Let me check and see if it's a pass-through.
And sometimes the state will set, and that's what we'll have to look at on this one, because I know like on phone, AT&T and stuff, the state says that the maximum can be X amount. And so that means you can negotiate up to what that X amount is. So I'm not sure, we'll have to look at this one to see if the state has, a specific that you can't go above a certain amount.
Well, and I'm not suggesting we should go above 6%. Really, what I'm trying to make sure we're all on the same page about is that when we go from 5% to 6%, we're not really like sticking it to Kansas Gas and getting more money out of them. We're effectively raising taxes on the people that have gas service in Bel Aire. And so I think we just need to be really intentional about making that decision.
Yeah.
It was previously 6% though, right? So we wouldn't actually be raising it.
No, it's
No, it's like
5%.
5%.
It was 5.
Yeah, this proposal is 6%, yes.
And again, the reason being is that, when we look at, so what we're saying is taxes. So, is gas cheaper in Wichita than it is in Bel Aire? Well, in this situation, it's, going to 6%, it's the same. So if you lived in Wichita, you're going to pay the same amount as you do in Bel Aire. And then I think what we talked about with Evergy is, where does that money go? Well, that money goes to the general fund, which the general fund then pays for like mowing of our rights of ways. Parks does some of that. The street fund that's in that we transfer money to. So, those are revenues that come in that we then can use to maintain the right of ways. And that's the whole idea of that, is we have to mow them. And, when someone comes in and wants to do something in a right of way or easement, they have to get a permit from us. And we have to find out what they're doing and stuff. So we kind of monitor the right of ways. And that's why they are fine paying us for that, is because they want to make sure that the easement is kept safe, that we're keeping it mowed, that trees aren't growing up and roots causing problems and things like that. So because we had the same discussion, is what do we use that money for? And really that's what it's for.
And I remember on the Evergy agreement, we ended up going up, I think, a percentage on it as well.
Yes,
And the reason that we did that is because all of the expenses of maintaining that right of way seemed like they actually added up to be a lot more expensive than what we were collecting in fees, just as we kind of talked about it. But I think we've got new council members since then, and I remember not really understanding that until we went through that discussion. And so I wanted to make sure they also have learnings that I had during that Evergy discussion.
Appreciate that clarification, because the way I was understanding it was not quite that way. So thank you.
One question I did have on the reopener provision, and this is just more of a question: how do you manage this? And it's just like, how do you manage the contract? The contract's a 15-year contract. Somehow you have to have some particular tells you in 15 years, pull this contract out and get it renegotiated, right? So what are you doing on the reopener? Is that similar type of thing? I don't know what the process is, but I'm just asking.
Yeah, so you're right. You got to monitor those, and so I just tell Ted to monitor those. So that's how we do that. He's the one that wants all the money, so if he wants more, then go look at it.
If you could check my inbox, guys.
We, as we're reviewing some, Councilmember Smith and I got to talking about just for my own contract review process, looking at some like software that does allow you to kind of monitor the next 6 months, these franchise agreements are coming due, so you can start talking about it and talking through council options. So we're doing some very preliminary research on that kind of stuff.
Okay. So we're still looking at that.
Answering the question of, who do we have contracts with, when do they expire, I think is a difficult question for us that probably takes a lot of staff time right now,
Well, I don't want to have a big discussion about it. I just want to make sure that we have a mechanism in place. And it sounds like
I don't think we have a great one right now.
It sounds like you're talking about one, but maybe this is similar to the one we talked about with the with the roads and the maintenance of roads and that frequency.
And really, we don't have, I mean, so you think about we've got Kansas Gas, which is what we're talking about. We've got Evergy, AT&T, and I think that's all that use our right-of-ways. Now, we do have an agreement with, I think it's Verizon or Sprint for our water tower, and it's a 20-year. So really, we're really going to manage about 4 or 5 of them. And so it's easy just to pull up because we'll be talking every once in a while, hey, how's our franchise agreement with such and such? We'll pull it out, look at it, and then we'll make a note of, okay, well, we've got a reopener next year or something like that. So that's the nice thing is there's not a lot.
So they're just post-it notes on Ted's door.
Well, a lot of the trigger is Ty and I's network, and once we see someone renegotiate or you see what other cities are doing, then you go back to yours usually.
Jackie, can you talk a little bit about in section 12, that third paragraph where when we're talking about reopener provisions, there's some language in there that kind of references what other franchise people might be paying for the use of the right of way. I'm not sure I fully understand what that's all about. And I think maybe that's saying that, like, if we're charging Kansas Gas 6% and we end up charging Evergy 5%, then they can ask to be charged 5% as well. Is that what that's intended to mean?
I think it's limited to any other gas or electric, right? So there's only one other competitor.
But
Right, it gives them a chance to reopen if we offer their competitor or an electric company a lower rate on this, on our right-of-way access. So I'm reading that.
Okay, that's what I thought I was reading.
Yeah.
And that could be a bit tricky since the legislator sets caps. If the legislator says, oh, the cap was 6 and now the cap's 5, then we said it for Evergy, but maybe they treat gas and electric differently. They probably do. They probably have different lobbyists. And, then because the state legislators have said, well, now you can only charge Evergy 5, then Kansas Gas can come in and say,
Right.
hey, reopen and we're going to only be charged 5 now.
Nice thing is it's on them to monitor and notice that and request the reopener. So that's
So you don't have any concerns with that?
right. No, that's from the way that it's written, they get to supervise all that.
Very good. Any other issues we need to discuss or tonight?
So, Mr. Mayor, if there's a just clarification on that franchise fee, where that comes from, I can email that out. But is this ready for the main agenda next week?
I think it's fine. Did everybody, council members all agree with this contract to be on the agenda for next week?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape. Any other issues we want to talk? Almost 9 o'clock. If not, I think we'll just be dismissed then. Everybody have a good evening, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Thank you.